Karoline Leavitt quietly stepped into one of Washington, D.C.'s most exclusive restaurants. Dressed modestly in a white shirt and jeans, she blended in like any other diner. The soft glow of a crystal chandelier shimmered across walls inscribed with phrases honoring freedom and equality. But before she could find a seat, a young server named Riley, with bright green hair and a cold, assessing stare, intercepted her. "The good tables are taken. You can sit here," Riley said, gesturing dismissively toward a table near the kitchen. Their tone was deceptively sweet, but the underlying message was clear: you don't belong here. A few guests turned to glance at the scene, sensing the tension in the air. What unfolded next shocked the entire restaurant and exposed a deeper truth that no one expected. Before we reveal the full story, comment where you're watching from and subscribe so you don't miss more powerful moments like this one. As the golden sunset reflected off Washington, D.C.'s sleek glass skyline, it lit up the polished exterior of Unity Haven, a luxury dining space and intellectual hub for the city's elite. Inside, warm oak accents, soft ambient lighting, and wall art celebrating free speech set the tone for thoughtful debates on politics, diversity, and inclusion. Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary and secretly the founder of Unity Haven, had come unannounced to observe the restaurant's service anonymously. She wanted no special treatment. But Riley, having recognized her from the news and disapproving of her conservative stances, made no effort to hide their disdain. Without a smile, they led Karoline to the least desirable table and dropped the menu with a dismissive thud. "This is yours. Don't expect VIP service," they muttered. Karoline, unfazed, replied only with a polite smile and a steady, sharp look. "Thank you." Moments later, Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett entered the restaurant for a scheduled event on equality. Radiant in a red designer dress, she immediately commanded attention. Riley's demeanor changed in an instant. Eyes lit up, posture straightened, voice bright. "Right this way, ma'am." They beamed, offering the best table in the house with a bow. What happens next reveals not just a twist in the evening, but a powerful commentary on bias, respect, and what happens when we make assumptions based on appearance or ideology. "Miss Crockett, what an honor. Please, allow us to seat you at our finest VIP table." Jasmine Crockett, poised and radiant in her signature red dress, gave a graceful nod as she was escorted to a sunlit window-side table. Across the room, Karoline Leavitt watched in silence. There was no bitterness in her expression, just a faint smile, the kind worn by someone who already knows how the story ends. Riley moved through the elegant interior of Unity Haven with practiced ease, their white sneakers whispering over the polished oak floor. The glow from the chandelier above flickered in their eyes as they arrived at Jasmine's table. With a perfectly rehearsed smile, they placed a glass of deep red wine before her. "Our finest vintage, just for you, Miss Crockett," Riley said smoothly. "Let me know if there's anything else you need." Jasmine gave a distracted nod, her attention focused on the documents in front of her, seemingly unaware of Riley's eager attentiveness. Meanwhile, tucked away near the warmth of the kitchen, Karoline remained at the least desirable table in the restaurant, the very one she'd been led to with obvious disdain. Intent on experiencing the restaurant without revealing her identity as its secret owner, she quietly observed. Her gaze followed Riley's every move, noting the grace, the speed, and the selective attention. Despite being seated, Karoline hadn't yet been served. Riley, clearly avoiding her, circulated efficiently among the tables, their cold indifference toward Karoline becoming more and more obvious. Karoline, long accustomed to the subtle and not-so-subtle judgments that came with her position in the administration, remained calm. She flipped through the menu, fingertips brushing over the gold-embossed lettering, her composure unshaken. Nearby, Riley stopped to whisper to Marcus, a fellow server. Their voice, though hushed, carried just far enough. "She works for that administration," they muttered. "I don't serve conservatives." Marcus furrowed his brow, replying quietly, "Just do your job. Don't let your feelings get in the way." Riley shrugged and continued on, but their eyes, when they passed over Karoline again, were colder than before. Finally, Karoline raised her hand. Her voice was steady and clear. "I'd like the Wagyu steak, medium rare, and a glass of Pinot Noir." Riley approached with a tight smile that didn't reach their eyes. "Wagyu, ma'am? That's quite special," they said, their tone dripping with implication. "Are you sure?" Karoline met the condescension with a quiet nod and unwavering gaze. "Very sure." Riley jotted down the order, turned, and walked away, muttering to a nearby colleague. "Thinks she's a big deal." The restaurant hummed with energy, clinking wine glasses, bursts of conversation, but an undercurrent of tension threaded through the air, setting the stage for a revelation that no one in Unity Haven saw coming. At a corner table in Unity Haven, a heated discussion on immigration policy unfolded, voices rising with tension. A freelance journalist, spotting Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, approached with admiration and a handshake, praising her bold, progressive stance. Unity Haven had been founded as a place for civil discourse across ideological lines, a sanctuary where perspectives clashed but respect reigned. But on this particular night, one server seemed intent on making the space their personal stage. Karoline Leavitt watched quietly from her unassuming table near the kitchen. She wasn't just another guest, she was the hidden owner of Unity Haven. And tonight, she had chosen to observe how the staff treated patrons without revealing her identity. What she saw, however, was disturbing. Over 20 minutes had passed, and her table remained untouched, except for a near-empty glass of water. Meanwhile, Riley floated to and from Jasmine Crockett's table like a personal concierge. Every few minutes, Riley was back with a refill. "Everything all right, Miss Crockett? Can I get you anything else?" they asked, tone syrupy and attentive. Jasmine, distracted by conversations about her upcoming equality event, barely looked up. "Thanks. I'm fine," she said curtly. Still, Riley smiled with polished charm, then glanced toward Karoline, eyes glinting with smug satisfaction. At a nearby table, an elderly couple had started to notice. "That woman hasn't been served a thing," the wife said, her voice sharp with concern. "That server's chasing fame." Her husband nodded, eyes drifting to Karoline with sympathy. In another corner, a group of college students murmured, watching the situation unfold. "They're clearly ignoring her because she's not a VIP," one student said. "Or maybe it's political," another added, shaking his head. Karoline remained composed, her fingers tapping softly on the table's edge. She wasn't upset yet, but her mind was racing. She tracked Riley's movements like a press briefing, attentive, calculating, focused. The bias was obvious. The neglect was deliberate. Unity Haven was meant to be different. It was her vision, one of fairness, respect, and dignity for all, regardless of background or belief. But Riley was undermining that promise, one subtle act of favoritism at a time. The restaurant buzzed with conversation, punctuated by the clink of wine glasses and the scent of rosemary and seared steak. Every table hummed with life, except Karoline's, which remained barren. She sat back, calm yet vigilant, her eyes never leaving Riley, whose green-dyed hair sparkled under the chandelier's glow. Riley stopped once again at Jasmine's table, gently adjusting her napkin with a reverent air. "Everything okay, Miss Crockett?" they asked, their voice soft with admiration. Jasmine, absorbed in her notes for a speech, nodded without looking up. Riley lingered just a moment too long, then drifted away, once again bypassing Karoline without so much as a glance. At last, Karoline raised her hand. "Excuse me," she said, voice calm but unmistakably firm. "Could I ask how my order is coming along?" Riley stiffened. Their smile tightened. A flicker of annoyance flashed in their eyes. "Of course, ma'am," they replied, tone clipped. "It's a busy night. I'll check on it." But instead of heading toward the kitchen, Riley detoured to a nearby table, laughing and chatting with patrons in a discussion about tax reform. Karoline noticed. So did the elderly couple, who exchanged a knowing glance, faces etched with clear disapproval. A reckoning was coming. "That server is ignoring her," the elderly woman muttered, her silver earrings catching the soft chandelier light as she shook her head. "It's too obvious." Her husband, mid-bite, paused with his forecovering. "It's been nearly an hour." "That's not right." Their words weren't whispered, they carried, catching the attention of a trio of students nearby. Phones were quietly set aside. Eyes began to follow the story unfolding across the room. Sensing the room's shifting energy, Riley doubled down. They returned to Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's table with a fresh basket of artisan bread, their tone bright and rehearsed. "A special from the chef, just for you." "Thanks," Jasmine mumbled without glancing up, still focused on policy notes with her colleagues. Riley smiled, but their sideways glance toward Karoline carried a message as clear as a billboard. "This is who matters." Karoline's face remained composed, unreadable. But inside, the gears were turning. She hadn't built Unity Haven to create echo chambers or foster bias. It was meant to be a space for civil conversation across every divide. And yet, Riley's every gesture was stitching division into its very fabric. She considered speaking up, but paused. "Not yet." Her fingers lightly touched the rim of her water glass as she watched, silently measuring how far Riley would push and who else would notice. The tension in the restaurant thickened like storm clouds over glass towers. A freelance journalist seated a few tables away, who had earlier found Riley's energy charming, now stared down at a blank notebook. Her brows furrowed. "They're clearly favoring the congresswoman," she whispered to her companion, nodding toward Jasmine. "But that woman," she gestured subtly toward Karoline, "hasn't been served at all. It's blatant." Her companion, a policy analyst, shrugged. "Maybe she's just not a regular. Servers have favorites." The journalist shook her head. "No, it's more than that." At the students' table, a girl with long braided hair leaned forward. "It's not just favoritism. They're judging her for something. Look how differently they treat Miss Crockett." Another student, still scrolling, glanced up. "Probably because she's conservative. That server looks like they've got a problem with people like her." The remark lingered like smoke, confirming what many were beginning to suspect. This wasn't just bad service, it was political bias, paraded in plain view. Still oblivious to the rising scrutiny, Riley pushed forward. They approached a group of lobbyists at a nearby table, their voice loud enough to carry. "We're honored to serve people like Miss Crockett. She's fighting for justice." The compliment might have seemed innocent, but to Karoline, it was an arrow dressed in velvet. Her lips curved, faintly amused. She'd seen this before. The calculated exclusion masked as values, the subtle framing of us and them. But someone else had had enough. Marcus, another server, intercepted Riley near the bar. His tone was hushed but firm. "You're being too obvious," he said. "Serve her properly. This is getting out of hand." Riley smirked, adjusting their apron with casual defiance. "Relax, Marcus. I know what I'm doing. She's not a priority." Marcus sighed and glanced toward Karoline, concern etched across his face. He could feel the atmosphere shifting, friction turning to fire. At that moment, the elderly woman who had been watching finally acted. She raised her hand and beckoned Marcus over. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp. "Why hasn't that woman been served?" Marcus hesitated, caught between loyalty and principle. "It's just a busy night, ma'am," he replied awkwardly. "I'll check." As he hurried toward the kitchen, the woman turned to her husband, frustration rising. "Busy? Then why is everyone else being served like royalty?" Karoline watched the scene unfold, her exterior still serene, but her resolve was sharpening. Riley's behavior wasn't just unprofessional. It was a betrayal of the values she had poured into Unity Haven since its inception. All around her, the low hum of conversation swelled. Wine glasses clinked. Cutlery chimed. Whispers turned into side glances. The air felt charged, as if the entire restaurant was holding its breath. And at the eye of the storm sat Karoline Leavitt, quiet, composed, and unwavering. Her gaze never left Riley, who floated between tables with practiced grace, unaware that the moment of reckoning was rapidly approaching. The glass of water at Karoline's table had long since dried, leaving behind only condensation rings. Her Wagyu steak, ordered nearly an hour earlier, was still nowhere in sight. As Unity Haven's secret owner, Karoline felt the sting of the delay not just personally, but as a betrayal of the inclusive mission she had so carefully built into the restaurant's foundation. At the other end of the room, Riley glided back to Jasmine Crockett's table, their green hair catching the chandelier's glow. With practiced elegance, they placed an artfully arranged salad before the congresswoman. "This was specially prepared just for you, Miss Crockett," Riley said sweetly, their voice dripping with charm. Jasmine barely looked up. Deep in conversation about an equality campaign, she offered only a distracted nod, her focus fixed on the notes in front of her. Still, Riley lingered, as if proximity to power might lend them relevance. When their eyes met Karoline's across the room, the warmth vanished. Their smile faltered, revealing a flash of defiance. Karoline, composed and patient beyond reason, raised her hand again. Her voice was calm but carried weight. "I'm still waiting on my meal." Riley approached, avoiding her gaze. "Yes, I'll check on it now," they replied, their tone smooth but transparently insincere. Instead of heading to the kitchen, Riley detoured, again, this time to pour water at a nearby table where a group of lawyers discussed free speech. It wasn't just dismissive anymore. It was deliberate. Moments later, the evening's tension erupted into an unmistakable incident. Balancing a tray of wine glasses intended for Jasmine's table, Riley brushed past another server. A glass slipped, tipping and tumbling onto Karoline's table. A splash of red wine streaked across the pristine white of her shirt. Silence fell across the immediate area like a curtain. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks were frozen halfway to mouths. Riley stiffened. For a split second, panic flickered in their eyes, but just as quickly, they masked it. "Oh, I'm so sorry," they said, handing Karoline a flimsy paper napkin with robotic courtesy. They made no effort to help clean up. Without another word, they turned and walked away. Karoline dabbed her shirt quietly, her eyes fixed on Riley's back. She wasn't angry, not outwardly, but this moment had crossed a line. It wasn't just neglect anymore. It was humiliation, and she suspected it wasn't entirely accidental. She'd envisioned Unity Haven as a sanctuary of respect, a mosaic of voices and ideologies coexisting in civil space. But Riley was unraveling that vision thread by thread. The other patrons had seen enough. The elderly woman with the silver earrings stood abruptly. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but fury. "That woman has been mistreated from the moment she walked in. And now this? I want to speak to the manager." Now, her husband, usually reserved, rose beside her, his face set in disapproval. Their words rang out across the dining room, drawing eyes from every direction. Conversations halted. At the students' table, one girl whispered, "They did that on purpose. That's not just rude, it's targeted." The freelance journalist, notebook forgotten, turned to her companion. "It's politics," she murmured. "You can tell. She looks conservative. They clearly don't like her." Her friend shook their head. "Even if that's true, it doesn't matter. This is a restaurant, not a political arena." The words spread through the room like a ripple in still water, thickening the atmosphere. From across the dining area, Marcus, Riley's co-worker, had witnessed everything. He rushed to Karoline's table with a clean towel in hand and concern written all over his face. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," he said genuinely, crouching to wipe the table. His gestures were quiet, respectful, everything Riley's had not been. Karoline nodded, expression unreadable. But beneath the surface, a decision had been made. "I'll get your order right away," Marcus promised, his voice steady. Karoline offered a slight nod, her expression softening. "Thank you." But as Marcus turned away, his patience with Riley ran out. He shot a glare their way and whispered sharply, "You're causing real trouble. Cut it out." Riley shrugged, defiant. "I know what I'm doing. She's not important." But Riley was wrong. The spilled wine had done more than stained Karoline Leavitt's white shirt. It had ignited a chain reaction that couldn't be undone. Near the window, a man stood abruptly, his voice booming across the restaurant. "That's enough. How does a place like this allow a server to openly discriminate?" The room stirred, heads turned, conversations ceased, and the quiet hum of dinner transformed into a rising current of murmurs, whispers, and clicks as patrons lifted their phones to record. The crimson wine on Karoline's shirt had become more than a stain. It was a symbol, the visual proof of the escalating disrespect she had endured. And she knew it. She remained seated, poised and silent, her eyes fixed on Riley with calm intensity. Across the room, Riley stood frozen, tray still in hand, the first hint of panic flickering behind their eyes. The elderly woman, whose silver earrings shimmered under the light, pushed her chair back with a screech and rose to her feet. Her voice, though trembling, cut through the tension like a blade. "I've had enough," she declared. "This treatment is disgraceful. Someone bring the manager now." Her outburst reverberated through Unity Haven like a bell tolling for order. The students in the corner stopped mid-conversation. One girl lifted her phone, recording Karoline with a solemn look. Even the journalist, whose open notebook had remained untouched for minutes, leaned toward her companion and whispered, "This has gone too far. This is not how any restaurant should treat people." Another conservative patron near the window echoed the earlier outrage. "This is political discrimination. It's shameful and unacceptable." Riley, suddenly aware of how quickly the room had turned, attempted to regain control. Their confidence faltered as they looked around and realized the room was no longer on their side. The silence was gone, replaced by something louder, something irreversible. The reckoning had begun. Riley approached Karoline's table cautiously, a paper napkin in hand. Their voice was unsteady, but they clung to a veneer of politeness. "I'll grab a clean cloth right away, ma'am. Please accept my apology." But before they could turn away, a firm voice cut through the tense air. "That won't be necessary, Riley." Emma, the restaurant manager, had stepped forward from the hostess stand. Her posture was poised, her high bun and sharp black blazer radiating authority. As she made her way between tables, the chandelier's light followed her like a stage spotlight. She stopped in front of Karoline's table, bowed slightly, and addressed her with warmth and precision. "Miss Leavitt, please accept my sincerest apologies for what you've endured. Your presence here is an honor." For a moment, the entire restaurant froze. The conversation stopped. Glasses hung in midair. Even the background music seemed to dim. Riley stood motionless, tray trembling in their hands, eyes wide with disbelief. "Miss Leavitt," they stammered, their voice hollow. Emma turned to them, her tone firm and unwavering. "Yes, Miss Karoline Leavitt is the founder and owner of Unity Haven. And tonight, you've made a serious error in judgment." A wave of stunned murmurs rippled through the dining room. At a nearby table, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett looked up from her notes, eyebrows raised. A faint, knowing smile played at her lips as she whispered to a colleague, "Did not see that coming." Brilliant play. The students in the corner were wide-eyed. One girl, still recording, whispered, "She's the owner? That's legendary." The elderly couple sat back down, visibly relieved. The husband nodded slowly in approval, while his wife leaned in and whispered, "Justice, finally." The freelance journalist, cheeks flushed from earlier support of Riley, scribbled in her notebook with renewed urgency, as if trying to rewrite her own perspective in real time. Meanwhile, Riley, pale and visibly shaken, tried to recover. I didn't know. I just thought. Miss Crockett fights for justice. I thought she deserved more, but their justification fell apart under Karoline's gaze. Karoline slowly rose from her seat. Though petite, she radiated undeniable presence. The wine stain on her shirt no longer looked like a mark of humiliation, but a badge of quiet strength, proof of her restraint in the face of targeted bias. She stepped forward into the center of the room. The chandelier cast a warm golden halo above her. The entire restaurant watched, breath held, as she looked around, meeting the eyes of Jasmine, the stunned patrons, and finally Riley. Her voice was clear, powerful, and unwavering, more a declaration than a speech. Unity Haven wasn't built to divide. I created this place so that everyone, no matter their beliefs, background, or politics, is treated with respect. She paused, scanning the room. Justice doesn't mean choosing sides. It means ensuring everyone has a seat at the table. A beat of silence followed. Then, the room erupted, not in chaos, but in quiet applause. It wasn't just for Karoline's words. It was for what they stood for. The mission of Unity Haven had just been defended, not with outrage, but with dignity. We cannot allow bias to destroy what we've built together. Karoline's words flowed like a steady river, firm, unwavering, cleansing the room of any lingering doubt. A hush settled over Unity Haven as her message sank in. Riley lowered their head, fists clenched at their sides, silent tears slipping down their cheeks. From a corner table, a student leaned toward a friend and whispered, "She's right. We judge too quickly." Across the room, the elderly woman dabbed her eyes, gratitude softening her face. Emma stood beside Karoline, posture firm, gaze locked on Riley. "You need to go to the office," Emma said quietly, her tone leaving no room for debate. Riley nodded, moving slowly across the room like a shadow, eyes fixed on the wooden floor. Their presence seemed to fade with each step. From behind the bar, Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His eyes followed Karoline with admiration, not just for her leadership, but for her courage in standing up for principle over pride. Karoline didn't return to her table. Instead, she remained where she stood, eyes sweeping the dining room once more. She paused briefly on Riley, who lingered at the exit, shoulders hunched. "I'm not here to punish," she said softly, her voice resonant. "I'm here to remind us that in a divided world, we still have a choice, to lead with kindness, to listen with respect." Unity Haven was built as a promise of that. Not just for me, but for all of you. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was sacred. The freelance journalist at the back scribbled frantically, her voice barely audible as she muttered, "This is the story of the year." One of the students at the corner table tapped their phone excitedly. "This is going viral," they whispered. "She's amazing." The elderly couple clasped hands across the table, their eyes full of something the room had been missing all night: hope. Even Jasmine Crockett, before turning back to her notes, gave Karoline a small, respectful nod, an unspoken recognition between two people who understood the weight of public responsibility and the power of grace. But the moment wasn't just about Karoline. Near the doorway, Riley paused, wiping away another tear. Beneath the guilt was something new, a flicker of clarity. They looked back at Karoline, eyes filled with remorse and the beginnings of resolve. They hadn't just failed Karoline. They'd betrayed the very ideals they once believed they stood for. Karoline met their gaze and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It said everything. You can still begin again. A subtle shift passed through Unity Haven. The air, once thick with tension, now held something quieter, more intentional. The golden lights glowed warmer. The acoustic music felt clearer. Conversations resumed, but with a new tone. Softer, thoughtful. The staff, from Marcus to the cooks peeking from the kitchen, watched Karoline with renewed respect. Because Unity Haven wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a living idea, proof that respect, humility, and shared humanity still had a place in the world. It was a powerful reminder. Even in the most divided times, there is always space for kindness, growth, and understanding. As the glass doors of Unity Haven slowly closed for the night, the glow of the chandeliers faded, leaving behind a warm hush. Only a few soft lights remained, casting quiet reflections over empty tables draped in white linens, the remnants of an unforgettable evening. Karoline Leavitt stood alone in the center of the now-still dining room. Her eyes lingered on the wall murals etched with words like freedom, dialogue, and inclusion. After revealing her identity and delivering a speech that shifted the entire room, she knew the moment called for more than silence. It demanded reflection. She called an emergency staff meeting that very night. Around a long wooden table, the team gathered in a quiet circle. The soft amber lighting bathed their faces, some etched with concern, others with guilt, uncertainty, or simply quiet curiosity. Riley stood in the back, hands clenched tightly in front of them, gaze locked on the floor, streaks of tears still visible. Marcus stood beside Emma, who remained poised and serious, though not unkind. From chefs still in their aprons to dishwashers with weary eyes, every staff member sat silently, waiting. Karoline stepped forward, not as the owner, not as the public figure, but as a colleague. She rested one hand gently on a chair, her voice warm and measured, a calm contrast to the powerful declaration she had made earlier in the dining room. Unity Haven is more than a restaurant, she began. It's a promise, a space where every person is treated with dignity, no matter their politics, beliefs, or background. Tonight, we came dangerously close to breaking that promise. She paused, letting her words sink in. Her gaze moved slowly from face to face, stopping a beat longer on Riley. Riley looked up, visibly shaken. Their lips quivered as they stepped forward, voice barely above a whisper. I'm truly sorry, Miss Leavitt, they said, their voice raw with emotion. I let my personal beliefs take control. I thought I was standing up for the right things, but I see now I was wrong. They exhaled, eyes locking with Karoline's, no longer defiant, but humble, awakened. I don't think I deserve to stay here. Karoline held their gaze, then shook her head gently. Her tone was kind, but firm. Riley, your mistakes don't define you. What defines you is what you do next. Growth doesn't come from perfection. It comes from accountability. She turned back to the full room, her voice strengthening with conviction. All of us have biases. We're human. But working here means recognizing them and working through them. Unity Haven isn't just about food. It's about what we stand for. Fairness, dignity, and the courage to treat each other better than the world sometimes teaches us to. A quiet stillness settled over the group, no longer tense, but thoughtful. Riley nodded slowly, gratitude and humility etched into every line of their face. Karoline smiled, not out of triumph, but from hope. Tonight had revealed the cracks, but it also showed the strength of what they had built. Unity Haven had been tested, and now, together, they would rebuild it stronger. I've been judged for my work, for what I believe, Karoline began, her voice soft but resonant. But I've learned something. If we don't open our hearts, we stay trapped in division. She paused, then shared a story, her tone quiet and reflective, like a fireside confession. When I first stepped into politics, a colleague publicly attacked my views. I was furious. I wanted to strike back. But a mentor pulled me aside and said, "Don't argue to win. Listen to understand." That advice changed everything. She looked around the room. Unity Haven was born from that moment. This place isn't about proving who's right. It's about listening before judging. That's what makes us different. Her words landed with quiet power. Marcus, typically reserved, gave a small nod, his eyes shining with new awareness. An older chef with lines carved deep into his face muttered under his breath, "I've gotten annoyed at customers for how they talk. Maybe it's time I rethink that." Nearby, a young dishwasher leaned toward a colleague. "I didn't expect her to be this real," they whispered. From the back of the room, Riley stepped forward, gathering courage. Their voice trembled, but their words were steady. I grew up in a house where politics meant arguments. I joined protests thinking I was fighting for good. But tonight, I realized I became the thing I stood against. I judged others just because they were different. They looked straight at Karoline, eyes full of sincerity. I want to make it right. If you'll let me try. Karoline smiled, not with victory, but with encouragement. The chance isn't mine to give, Riley. It's yours to take. It starts with this. Treat every customer the way you'd want to be treated. She turned to the full team, her tone now firm. We don't just serve meals. We serve respect, dignity, and understanding. That's what makes Unity Haven more than a restaurant. Emma, standing beside her, stepped in with calm authority. Starting immediately, I'll be implementing stronger training for every staff member to ensure this mission is lived out every day. What happened tonight must never happen again. She turned to Riley, her expression softer. You have potential, but now, you'll need to prove it through your actions. Riley nodded, the weight of realization replaced with a spark of determination. The room shifted from tension to quiet resolve. A young team member hesitantly raised their hand. Miss Leavitt, how do we even know if we're being biased? Sometimes. I don't realize when I'm doing it. Karoline gave a thoughtful smile. Ask yourself this. Am I treating this person the same as I would anyone else? If the answer is no, pause. Reflect. That's where change begins. The meeting wrapped up, but no one rushed to leave. Conversations bloomed around the room as staff members began opening up, sharing stories of their own biases, of lessons learned, of growth they hadn't realized they needed. Marcus walked over to Riley, placing a hand on their shoulder. You've got this, he said with quiet reassurance. Karoline stood back, silently watching her team come together, something in her heart shifting. Unity Haven hadn't just survived the night. It had transformed. As the last staff filtered out, Riley lingered for a moment longer. They looked at Karoline, voice soft but clear. Thank you. I won't let you down. Karoline met their eyes with a gentle nod, her expression steady as stone, warm as morning light. I believe in you. She stepped outside as the lights behind her dimmed, leaving Unity Haven in the quiet glow of its own ideals. But in Karoline Leavitt's heart, the restaurant had never shone brighter. Night had fully descended on Washington, D.C. Streetlights flickered across glass towers, casting a warm shimmer over the city's thoughtful hush. A vibrant cityscape pulsed gently around her, alive but contemplative. Karoline stood still on the sidewalk just outside the doors of Unity Haven, her white shirt still bearing the faint, dried stain from the wine earlier that evening. She looked up at the glowing sign above, Unity, lit in soft neon. It wasn't just a name. It was a mission, carved from her own beliefs and battles. The echoes of the staff meeting still lingered in her mind. Riley's emotional apology, the team's recommitment to their shared values. Beneath it all, Karoline felt an unexpected calm settle in her chest. She began to walk, her sneakers tapping softly against the pavement. A light breeze danced through the quiet street, and her breath mingled with the cool night air, carrying reflections of everything the evening had revealed. Unity Haven wasn't just a place to eat. It was her vision, a living, breathing effort to mend the fractures of a polarized society. And tonight, that vision had almost unraveled. Not because of Riley alone, but because of the very divisions she had long fought against: judgment, assumption, silence in the face of difference. Karoline paused beside a wooden bench beneath a flickering red lamplight. She sat down slowly, her eyes drifting to the distant silhouette of the Capitol building under a silver moon. She remembered her early days in public life, how her conservative views had drawn criticism from every angle: press, pundits, even old friends. She hadn't survived those years by lashing out. She endured by choosing to listen, to learn, to lead by example. Unity Haven had been born of that principle, a space where people could disagree, break bread, and find connection despite it all. And though Riley had tested that dream tonight, Karoline didn't feel anger. What she saw in Riley was something familiar, a younger version of herself, passionate, but torn between idealism and understanding. And in Riley's face during the meeting, she'd witnessed something rare: honest transformation. It wasn't just a win for Unity Haven. It was a spark, proof that even now, change was possible. That kindness still had the power to reach across lines others thought unbreakable. She pulled out her phone and opened a new social media post. The freelance journalist from earlier had published her account of the evening. The headline read, "A Guardian of Inclusion, How One Night at Unity Haven Gave DC a Lesson in Grace." Karoline smiled, not out of pride, but gratitude. The story was already spreading, and she knew it would land in the feeds and minds of people searching for something to believe in. She leaned back, the bench creaking gently beneath her, the city's hum unfolding around her once again. Her thoughts drifted to the broader moment, one filled with bitter debate over free speech, equality, immigration, and identity. But here, tonight, something had broken through the noise. Not a grand solution, but a moment of clarity. A moment where strangers were reminded that respect is not weakness, and disagreement does not have to mean division. Karoline closed her eyes, breathed in the cool night, and whispered to herself, more promise than reflection, "We're just getting started." Karoline knew that Unity Haven was just a small dot on the map, a modest restaurant in a vast, divided world. But if it could shift the perspective of even one person like Riley, it was more than enough. Every small step, she reminded herself, every act of kindness is a brick in building a better future. She rose from the bench, took a deep breath, and let the cool night air fill her lungs. Despite the challenges, Unity Haven still stood strong, a beacon, not because it was perfect, but because it kept striving. In her mind, she saw the days ahead, Riley greeting guests with genuine warmth, Marcus embracing his leadership with quiet confidence, and the entire team pouring intention and inclusion into every plate they served. She imagined the dining room filled with people from all walks of life, politicians, students, families, strangers, coming together, laughing, and finding common ground over good food and open conversation. The streetlights of Washington, D.C. sparkled like scattered stars, casting a soft glow over the pavement as Karoline walked on, her figure slowly blending into the passing crowd. But inside her, something glowed brighter than ever, a quiet, steady flame of hope. Tonight, Unity Haven hadn't just endured a challenge. It had become a symbol, a place where kindness triumphed over judgment, where understanding was stronger than division, a light that pierced the dark lines of our world's disagreements. She paused at a crosswalk, watching the steady rhythm of headlights sliding by, and in that still moment, she felt it, the power of small choices, the quiet decisions that could shift someone's life, reshape an idea, or rewrite a belief. This night wasn't just about her, or Riley. It was about everyone who passed through the doors of Unity Haven, from seasoned politicians to idealistic students, from curious journalists to everyday workers. Each carried their own stories, their own biases, but also the capacity to grow. She thought of Riley again, the way their voice cracked with sincerity, the determination in their eyes as they vowed to do better. She remembered the elderly couple who spoke up, the students who bore witness, and the silent shift that swept the room when respect replaced judgment. Karoline smiled, knowing this story would ripple outward, like a pebble dropped into a still lake. Beyond the restaurant, beyond this night, into a world overwhelmed by noise, conflict, and cynicism. In a time when people so easily lost faith in each other, debating freedom, justice, identity, she held onto something simple and powerful. Change begins with small, human moments. A sincere apology. A meal served with care. A conversation that begins not with an argument, but a willingness to listen. Unity Haven, with its glowing sign and walls etched with words of inclusion, wasn't built to erase differences. It was built to hold them, to bridge them, one guest, one plate, one conversation at a time. She stood quietly as the wind moved through the streets, carrying with it the breath of a city alive with potential. And in that moment, she envisioned the future. The tables of Unity Haven full again, clinking glasses, shared stories, laughter echoing under soft lights. Riley, no longer a server shaped by bias, but a listener shaped by growth, learning from every guest. And Karoline, still walking forward, still believing that even the smallest moments could lead to something far greater. Karoline imagined herself continuing to lead Unity Haven with unwavering belief that no matter how fractured the world may become, there would always be space for kindness. Each step she took down the quiet city sidewalk was more than movement, it was a declaration. Unity Haven was never just a restaurant. It was a living message, a call to action, a reminder that every person, whether a server like Riley, a patron like the elderly couple, or even someone simply hearing this story, holds the power to choose inclusion over division. As she disappeared into the crowd, Karoline's small but resilient figure moved like a quiet breeze through the night, carrying something invisible but vital: hope. Yes, Unity Haven had triumphed tonight. But this was not the end. It was the beginning for her, for Riley, for everyone willing to believe that empathy still mattered. She walked on with quiet conviction, believing that one moment, one choice, truly could change the world. The story of Unity Haven and the conflict between Karoline Leavitt and Riley is a reflection of the deeper political and social divides running through modern America. In 2025, as tensions over free speech, immigration, and equality continue to fracture communities, what unfolded inside that restaurant mirrors real-world dynamics far beyond its walls. Riley's preferential treatment of Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, admired for her progressive platform, and the dismissal of Karoline due to her conservative identity, reflect how ideological bias now often dictates our behavior in restaurants, online spaces, workplaces, and even casual conversation. The wine spill wasn't just an accident. It became a moment of reckoning, a spotlight on what happens when prejudice replaces professionalism, when assumptions override humanity. And when Karoline's identity as the owner of Unity Haven was revealed, it forced everyone to confront the real cost of such bias. Her speech, centered on the principle that justice is treating everyone equally, wasn't just a powerful personal stand. It was a call for America itself to return to dialogue, to empathy, to fairness. In a nation where political identity so often defines relationships, jobs, and treatment, Karoline's message asked a vital question. Are we treating others as we would want to be treated, even when we disagree? Riley's journey, from judgment to self-awareness, embodied the possibility for growth. By owning their mistake and expressing a sincere desire to change, Riley showed that transformation is always possible when we choose humility over ego and listening over labeling. The staff meeting that followed, where Karoline shared her own story of being publicly criticized for her beliefs, wasn't just a moment of internal reconciliation. It reflected something deeply needed in the wider American culture, the building of bridges through listening, not attacking, through curiosity, not condemnation. In today's divided society, the lesson is simple yet profound. Every small act of fairness, every moment of genuine respect, is a step toward healing. Whether it happens in a coffee shop, a corporate boardroom, or a restaurant like Unity Haven, the work of unity begins with individuals. As Karoline reminded her team, and by extension, the country, our strength doesn't lie in sameness. It lies in how we treat those who see the world differently. Unity Haven stands as a powerful reminder that kindness and inclusion aren't just ideals, they're daily choices. Each of us has the ability to help shape a more united and compassionate America. Subscribe to the channel for more uplifting stories like the journey of Unity Haven. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video with more real-life lessons in empathy, respect, and the power of human connection.